Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caroline's podcast, The Cooldown, about lots of different things, and definitely not simply a cool down about exercise. I hope this morning finds you well. Such a beautiful day, lovely blue sky. And just wanted to say that if you have any questions for me or you'd like to contact me, please feel free to do so at Caroline's Pilates, or you can send me a text or message me if you like. So I had a lot of questions that came in to me, just asking me different things. So my podcast, I had intended to have it about that, but I'm sure as many of you who live in Bangor will know, a couple of days ago there was a bad fire in Prospect Road in Bangor, and it brought back a lot of personal memories for me about two very, very large fires that happened in Bangor many years ago when I was very young. And I just before I started the podcast there, I did go back and see if I could find any information on either of them or both of them. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to locate dates or anything else for them. But most of you who live in Bangor and many of you outside of that will have spent, I'm sure, some time in your younger life, times at the Queen's Court Hotel in Bangor along the Queen's Parade there. I know I had just been in it a couple of times. I was quite young and there was bouncers on the door, as I'm sure if you've been had been there you would know, and they were very strict. I think I got in once, and the other few times I was turned away. So I remember, I remember one time I actually did go round. I think it was the Bay City Rollers were playing, and got in to see them. Came out, and when I turned to the left, I lived quite close to the Queen's Court Hotel anyway. As I turned to the left to come home, didn't I see my mum and my my granny standing on the corner watching for me, just to make sure, but they were sort of out of sight, so that I couldn't see them to make sure that I got home all right. So that's a funny memory I have about that. But I remember thinking I didn't go out to see the fire in Prospect Road, but my husband, Morris, walked to the gate just to have a quick look up the road. I mean, we could hear and see the fire brigade. And I think I looked out the window just to make sure that, there wasn't anybody in need or anything like that. But I seen people across the road walking up and down with phones, and amazing how many people actually had their cameras filming. It takes me all my time to text. And then lots of times when I've thought to myself, oh, I should have taken a picture of that, or I should have, it's always too late, old school, I suppose. But yeah, there was lots of people filming that. And for me, I found it quite frightening. Having had the experience two times actually of extremely big fires that were very, very close to where I lived. And, there's a lot of acrid smoke and things like that can cause you quite serious difficulties, especially if you have any breathing issues or asthma or stuff like that. But the Queen's Parade, yes, was very, very popular with the young crowd in Bangor. And as I said, many people travelled from further afield, Belfast, Newton Ards, everywhere else to go there. It was a popular venue. It hosted fantastic acts over the years. It had a great dance floor downstairs, seating area upstairs. It was the place to be. And so yeah, I remember around that, just prior to a fire, somebody from Bangor, a business person from Bangor, who was quite well known in the town actually, coming round to my mum's house. And the reason I know is because when the doorbell went, I answered the door, and the person said to me, could I speak to, your mother by name? And I said, yes, okay, I'll get her for you. So it later turned out that this person was asking my mother if she had any thoughts of selling her property. Now, although a lot of people are very well aware of this Queensbread development that has gone on for years and years and years and years and years, long before the last sort of upsurge in 2001 sort of became apparent, but many, many years before that. And my mother just couldn't really get why it had come out of the blue. I mean, there wasn't any talk in the town or anything like that. But apparently, this gentleman was connected to developers and was trying to see if people in the area would be willing to sell their properties to them. And of course, she had no notion of selling her property. And that was that. Uh, Maybe coincidence. I don't know. But it wasn't very long after that. I woke up to this very, very loud crackling and a smell of smoke. And unfortunately, the Queen's Parade was burnt to the ground. And that gap stayed in the middle of the Queen's Parade for a long, long time. Very, very scary experience to be standing so close to something so big. And it burning, and I mean, it burned. It wasn't just a lot of black acrid smoke. Very, very scary and very, very sad for many people who may be listening to this who either remember that or remember reading about it, or thinking about just walking past it the next day or days after it and not being there anymore, losing that ability to use that venue for, people used it for birthday parties, celebrations, and everything else. And it was a big mainstay in the centre of the Queen's Parade in Bangor. Everybody knew of the Queen's Court Hotel, and I'm sure I have lots of varying memories of being there or knowing somebody who was there. Um, the closer to home it came for me was the King Street Timber Yard, which was another occasion when and the King Street Timber Yard there had been there for years and years. I mean, carpenters, woodworkers, everybody went down there for their screws and their nails and their hammers and their wood. I find it a fascinating place because it just backed on to the back of my mother's house. And it was a wonderful place. You used to be able to go through the front of it and out the back of it. And that beautiful, wonderful smell that stayed with me, all of my life until now. Um, and still does, a fresh wood, just freshly cut wood. Such a wonderful, wonderful, clean kind of woody smell. I love it. So for me, again, I was very young. You could walk up and around the side of it, and there used to be four houses in at the back there, which are no longer there. So they would have sort of backed out towards where the car park is now at the back of King Street. I used to come home that way if I was out from the main street, or if I was in at the back of Wellworths. I used to walk along the back there of the back of the houses, and you could come up that little side where the King Street Timber Yard was. It was family owned, and it was very popular. And then I was in bed one night. My mum was on holidays, and I remember smelling smoke, and I'm a very, very light sleeper. So I got up and then started to hear this crackling sound, and looked out one of the windows and could see that there was a fire in the timber yard. Now, I mean, what a place to have a fire because it's wood, you know. The only thing that might have been metal would have been the front gates to it or parts of the back of it, like the main structure, the outer structure of it. But internally, I mean, it was all wood and machines for cutting the wood and all that kind of thing. And then, of course, the fire brigade came, and I remember standing out on the hill of to the bottom of the house because my fear was that it was going to burn the whole of our house down. And you could hear the glass breaking. You could smell the plastic fascia burning. The down pipes of the back of the house, and it was an extremely big fire and very, very frightening. And the next day, anyway, after the experience of that, and it's funny, as I said at the beginning there, when the fire in Prospect Road went up there, that's all I could think of. It just brought all those memories back to me. The sound of the sound of a fire is, much more than just looking at it and seeing the flames. You can hear the glass breaking, you can hear the wood almost shrinking. It has a whole life unto itself, really. And but as I said, when the King Street timber yard fire was going on, I was terrified, really, really terrified. I mean, you're talking about feet between that structure and the return of the back of my mother's home, or our home, our family home. And so anyway, the next day, it took quite a while to put it out, and then it had to be made safe. So apparently, it had been made safe. There was a very small gap between. Really, the only thing that separated that building from my mother's garage, or my mummy's garage, as I would prefer to call her, was probably about 3 feet, and then the right hand side of my mum's garage. So apparently, it was said that because there had been so much water needed to put the fire out, a very added on serious accident occurred. That nearly lost me, my mother. She was in her garage one day, and there's an oil tank in there, and she was checking the oil, and the wall of the garage fell in and pushed the tank up against her to the other side of the wall. It was said that because there was so much water needed to douse the flames of the timber yard fire, that it had softened the surround ground, and obviously it was almost like a landslide had occurred. Now, I mean, that was frightful, the fact that because of that fire, which just sort of popped up out of nowhere, a little bit like Prospect Road, a little bit like the Queen's Court Hotel, nearly took the my mother's life, and that affected her greatly. My mother was left with lifelong claustrophobia, which at times is extremely, extremely difficult for her to, even get on a plane. The thought of traveling, which obviously she has done, but I see the personal effects of what that created and caused. And it was hard going even after that. The person that owned the timber yard at that time didn't want to rebuild Mummy's garage, so it took quite a bit of discussion. Given that her garage was no longer suitable for her to use simply because of the fire in the timber yard. And then, unfortunately, I seen a great change in my mother over a period of time in relation to that experience, because obviously when she came home, the timber yard was gone. The back of her house was quite severely damaged, both window wise, and as I said, all the plastic piping and things like that. And then obviously to be in her garage and find that her whole structure had fallen down and nearly killed herself was a terrible, terrible thing. It was terrible for me as her daughter to see the change and what that had sort of, for a period of time was extremely sad for mummy. Your home is your home, and you expect it to be the one place that you can go where you can feel safe. And for a long time, mummy didn't have that, and obviously due to the Queen's Parade development, as some of you may know. In my previous podcast, well, we had to sell our homes there 7 years ago, because of it. But anyway, so yeah, that was a terrible thing. So and then of course, God help her, she was advised, to go down the legal route and all that kind of thing. Which again, people think, oh, but terrible, terrible experience, terrible, terrible experience. Ended up going to a small claims court, and the judge that sat on the case that day said to her at the end of the case, he said to her, I am extremely sorry that you were advised to go through the small claims court. He said your case should have been held in, the main court. It wasn't a small incident that had happened, and obviously she would have got a lot more money. Although in compensation, you know what I mean? But a lot of things that happen in your life are not always about money. You know, money doesn't restore what's happened to people physically or mentally. It may help to make life a little bit better in some ways, but you know, it's not always what people are looking the route to go down. Again, she was advised to do that by legal people. Unfortunately, the person that she got was obviously didn't do right by her, but she was told that in the court by the judge that sat on the case, that her case should have been not held in a small court. So none of it sort of worked out very well, and the process of a court like that is just, it's just unbelievable. You know what I mean? If you've ever experienced anything like that, how the people on the other side just, it still makes me angry to this day, to think of what depths they try to go to, you know, to make their case stand up well in a court of law. But there you go. Anyway, so yeah, the fire, and it's amazing how many it's amazing how many people stood for hours, you know, watching that. One fire brigade came, then the other one came with the cherry picker. I could just see them because they pass my front lounge if I'm in it, and but yeah, I mean, it was an empty house. It had been there for years. I've been here 8 years since having to sell to the government. And previous to that, I mean, that building has been there for years and years and years. It used to be shop, or the one beside it was a shop. So it sat there derelict for many, many, many years. There was nothing in it. It was empty. So, as people in the street said, you know, extremely strange, but there you go. So I didn't go near it. And I always think it's sad, even if a house is empty, it's very, very sad to stand, or I mean, for me personally, to stand and look at something like that. Even when I passed over to visit my mum the next day, I go up that way anyway. And, you know, to see the roof of a house, the rooms all sort of empty and burnt, and terrible, terrible experience. You think of the people that lived in that house, you know, the memories that they have, the experiences that they have. I suppose being a social anthropologist, which is something I've mentioned before on podcasts, that you know, I love all that kind of thing, the historical side of things, you know, like archaeology, anthropology. And yeah, you think of, you know, what went on in that home over the many years that people did live in it or frequent it. It was a lovely house. It was a lovely structure of a house, you know, typically Victorian. And it was lovely. I've often looked at it every day when I pass it, you know, and thought, like, what a waste, because it had been sitting there derelict for many, many, many years. But I think a fire, you know, it just creates an experience all of its own. And I found it quite sad when I walked past it, you know, to think that maybe then, if it has to be made safe, the roof was gone. One of the ceilings was gone. The front facade was gone. So obviously, just knock it down. But yeah, horrible experience, and one I think as soon as I smell smoke, even now, you know, if I smell smoke, or especially barbecue season through the summer, you know, I always open the window and, you know, smell the smell to see, like, is it the smell of a building, or, you know, and I did look out the window. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. One of the fire engines came back down and up the street, and I did obviously hear it because I was sort of semi awake all the time, and got out of bed and looked out the window just to make sure that there wasn't anything else going on in the street. Because I think when you've had experiences like that before, it just makes you very alert because a fire anywhere, even though it might be 10, 12, 15 houses away from you, can spread very quickly, especially in houses that are, sitting very close together because, the structure of the roof is usually wooden. So wood burns very quickly. So you do have to be very careful. But it came about very well because the fire didn't affect the house on the other side that's for sale, and then yesterday had a sold sign put on it, or the house on the right hand side. So, but there you go. There was nobody hurt or injured in it, and that's the most important thing. But while I was just looking on the computer before I started to do my podcast, I was trying to find the dates of those fires, and I came across a piece about, how do you know you come from Bangor, all 45 things or something that you remember, and one of them was about Jerry and Julie. Now lots of people who live in Bangor would know Jerry or Julie, or know of them, or have seen them sitting on the benches in the main street, maybe having a wee drink or having a sing song or whatever. I knew them personally, and I mean personally because they stayed with my mother. And not very long ago, I remember, I think I did mention this in a previous podcast. I remember walking up the Vennel, and a lady, my mother had just gone on up the road ahead of me. She was going up, I was coming down, and the lady stopped me and she says to me, "Excuse me, do you know that lady?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, I said, "It's my mother." And she said, "I just wanted to say to you that she had been a social worker in Bangor, through her working life." And she said, "I don't know how we would have managed without your mother, because many of the people that nobody in Bangor wanted to take in, as a bed and breakfast or a guest house." She said, "Your mother never turned anybody away. She always helped us and took them in." And that's how we came to have Julie and Jerry live with us. Now, I can't say that they weren't a pain in your butt at times. They did have a drinking problem. And for me personally, I see, people who have an issue with drink the same as I have an issue with chocolate and sweets and crisps and all the things that you shouldn't eat because it puts weight on you and everything else. The same as, any person that has an addiction, be it a light addiction or a strong addiction, you know, a lot of people stand in judgment of that. And yes, of course, people who drink a lot can be a pain in the bum, irritating and all the rest of it. But when you see the difficulty in people, as you well know, if you're even trying to lose a little bit of weight, which brings the fitness side of things into things as well, it's extremely difficult. And people will tell you, well, after 100 days, you know what I mean, you can break the habit. I don't know that I personally really, really agree with that. I mean, I've had times in my life where I have lost weight, and 100 days down the line, and you're still being very good, as they say, inverted commas, and you're not eating what you should eat, and doing things the way it's supposed to be done. And then all of a sudden something happens, some tragedy, somebody says something horrible, a situation in your life, and where do you head for? The bar of chocolate, or, the things that you've spent your 100 days trying not to eat. So now that could be just personal to me, but I definitely find that, if that 100-day thing, some people say less, was really, really, really true, then none of us would have any issues, you know what I mean? And once we would set our mind to things, we could really break those habits. And I think it's extremely, extremely challenging. People eat, drink, whatever, bet horses, all the things that people do. There are reasons there why those things started in the first place. There are issues that people have in their life, of loss, of sadness, of, confidence, not being able to get work, you know, feeling unloved, and all those other things that are reasons why people turn to other things to try and fill that gap or need or loss or whatever. And it's sad, it's sad. It's not for people to stand back and judge. And believe you me, many's a time in Bangor, if I because I would have been I lived in the town centre, so I would have been up and down all the time if I wasn't, when I was younger, doing shopping for mum, if she was cooking meals or whatever the case may be. And I had time to walk up Main Street many's and many's a time and see people walk up past Jerry and Julie and physically walk to the other side of the road to avoid them. They loved to chat, as any of you who have ever sat and chatted to Jerry and Julie would know. Of course they did. They're just ordinary people like everybody else. And yes, Jerry came from a wonderful family. He was a teacher all of his life, an intelligent gentleman. And Julie was not just his love muse, as some people thought. Julie was a really highly intelligent lady herself who came from a wonderful family in Scotland. And I don't know how many times my mum got them off the drink, just encouraging them with her wonderful chats that she gives about her own life and her own experiences. And when those two people were not on the drink, as they say, inverted commas again, they were just two wonderful people who had a beautiful relationship together, who talked, who were great friends together, who went out and went on the train. I remember, and my mum didn't have very much money herself, but she always went to the charity shops then, which are in now, but they weren't in then. If you were seen in a charity shop, it was usually people thought it was because you were poor. And even if that was the case, what about it? You know what I mean? What about it? Surely whatever money went into it went to a better cause anyway. But oh, I remember my mother putting Julie in the bath and washing her hair and getting her all these nice clothes from the charity shop. And Jerry the same. Well, obviously she didn't wash him in the bath, but my mother hated to see anyone hungry, anyone on the street, anyone without clothes. And to this very day, she's the same with animals and everything. And mainly because she was a post war child herself and spent many days hungry as well, like many, many, many of the older generation did. So those memories never leave you. But no, they were wonderful. I mean, I had some great discussions with them, great chats with them, and spent quite a lot of time. Julie and Jerry were with us for a long, long time, as were a lot of people with mental health issues that were just shunned, just shunned. People with schizophrenia, just, which I suppose really when a lot of people will say to me, and it's flattering and I love it and it's a wonderful compliment that, the way you teach, Caroline, we know that you care about us. And I think that is very true. It is very true. And I've said it before and I've told my classes that in all the venues that I taught in, I never was drawn to a venue because it was 5 star, 2 star, because it was fancy, because people would say, "Oh, look, she teaches in there." That was never my concern. Yes, it was a job. Yes, it paid. Yes, I have to pay my bills like everybody else. But it was always about the people that stood in front of me. And that's why I stayed much longer in venues than I may have wanted to do for other reasons. I stayed for those people. And yes, I think when they do say that to me, it is true. I have been a carer all my life, obviously with my children, but also in the home that I was reared in. There was people who, as I've just mentioned earlier, who maybe had families and never seen them, never came to visit them. I remember my mother putting people in the cars and taking them to their doctor's appointments and getting them their prescriptions and washing their clothes and, all the things that you would do for a family member who needed you. Who needed somebody to be there, she did that for these people. So when that lady spoke to me on the hill that time about thanking my mother for all the years that she took people in, and we're talking about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, when maybe somebody was drunk and on the street and, needed to be picked up, needed a warm bed, as she said, when we went to anybody else, we were just told no, but your mother always took them in. And with that taking them in, there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of strain, there was a lot of, no payment for anything that you did. But it was an eye opener. It really was an eye opener. It was an education that you would not get at school. An education for me. Hans was a fantastic gentleman that stayed with us. He was a builder, and I'm telling you that I never seen a worker like that man. He was up early in the morning. He was of kind of German descent. He was small, short man, and again loved his drink, but he was a worker. I mean, he really, really was a worker, and I'm sure there are lots of people in Bangor that would remember Hans from years and years ago. I mean, the stories, the experiences I had, and some of them were wonderful. Excuse me, when all those people would get together, you know what I mean, and they'd all be having a sing song, just really the same as anybody would do in a pub. But obviously, of course, when it's coming out of a house, people don't like it. But these people were really just living their life, you know what I mean? It was Saturday, they were having a drink, they were having a chat. And in that kind of business, I'm sure anybody that's in it, I remember gentlemen, all kinds of people coming to the door at times looking for accommodation, dressed in three-piece suits with briefcases with them and everything else. And you think, yes, of course, yes, we have a room. But I mean, they'd be trying to get people in through the night, into their room. You'd maybe go the next day. I remember Mummy was away on holidays one time, and this gentleman was in room one, businessman, the whole heap. I cooked his breakfast for him in the morning, and I was standing at the front door when he was leaving, and he chatted away about the business that he had and where he was heading off to and what he had done, and really, really, on the face of it, lovely person. And away he went anyway. I waved him off, cheerio, safe journey. Went in to do the room, and the mattress was just ready for the bin. And if there had been one mattress factory that was the only one in Bangor, it would have made some money, I can assure you. And I mean, those accidents can happen to anyone, anyone. But I would have respected and appreciated that gentleman more if he had have said to me when he was having his conversation with me in the morning, "Excuse me, I had an accident and your mattress is wet." I know it's a difficult thing to say, but I think if he had have said that, because he knew I was going to go in and see it, so, and that's just a minor thing, running a business like that. So again, on the side of B&B or guest house, I suppose if you filtered your people, like that social worker was more or less implying, that yes, there was lots of venues around, or places, but not any of them, or not many of them, wanted to go down that route. But what happened to those people then? So all those people that needed somewhere to stay or didn't have a bed to lie in or were suffering mental health issues, and many of them were. I mean, I seen mental health issues. I sat beside, and he was a lovely chap, a really lovely chap, and he used to talk away to the other voices in his head. And him and I had loads and loads of conversations. I mean, and come to think of it now, many of them did all have varying differences of mental health issues. And that was an experience in itself, and nobody came to see those people. So I put my mother up there, really at the top, you know what I mean, for a woman on her own to deal with what she dealt with in the business that she chose to run because it was what she knew. But the difficulties that came with that, So taking it back to Jerry and Julie, yes, and I am well aware that there were people in the town that went, "Oh, Jerry and Julie live in there. They live in there." My mother provided a home for them. Yes, they did live in there, but it was a home, and it was a home full of love. My grandmother lived in that until she was 96 years of age with us. There was a roof provided over their head. And when they left years later, They left, they were off the drink, and they had gone out, I think, and managed to get a home. But obviously, as I said, drink and all the addictions that we have, regardless, and some of them don't see, there's lots of addictions that we have in life that people wouldn't see as a bad addiction, but there's still things that we do that either draw our time away or whatever the case may be. But when they left mummy that time, all those years later, they were doing well in as much as they were off the drink. And, everybody thought they could go out and, maybe make a go of it on their own. But it wasn't to be. It didn't work out that way. And, very, very sad when I heard about Jerry and Julie towards the end. It was so sad because I suppose when they lived with us, you tend to feel, well, you knew what was happening and they had somewhere to stay, and at least they could come in safe and sound. And but it always caught up with them again, which was sad. And I think if they had gone their separate ways, I think Julie could have managed okay. Julie would have made it. But when Julie was off the drink, once Jerry hit it again, then that put her back on it. So yeah, those memories came back, folks, just by happening to look up about the fire and see if I could find the dates when those occurred. I mean, I was quite young when both of them happened. But yeah, both frightening experiences. Fire is not a pleasant thing to be around, and especially when it's out of control. Um, and then it can get out of control very quickly if you've got wind, or the wind's in the wrong direction and things like that. But yeah, so Julie and Jerry, yeah, I often thought, Bangor, and all the churches that we have in Bangor, and I know there was many people offered Jerry and Julie help, or gave them a few pound or whatever the case may be. But they did come home to us, so I knew Jerry and Julie very well, just like Marky, the painter artist. A wonderful, eccentric gentleman who stayed with us for a long, long, long time. Also, like when I think of it, really, in order to get through your everyday life, I suppose your brain moves forward, forward, forward. It's really only when people start to retire that they maybe sit down and allow all those memories and all those experiences of their life to come back into their head. And as a younger person, I suppose Marky always liked to wear the same coat. It was a cream coat that he used to wear, and he could paint on anything, absolutely anything. And a lot of people didn't really see him as an artist. He always put his artwork on pieces of cardboard, or even at the back of a cornflakes box. He would have just, wherever he was and whatever he had to hand, he would have painted on it. And I had some amazing conversations with Marky over the years, and he was, very eccentric, and he had very, very set ways, and you wouldn't change him. And there are people that would have talked to him and mocked him and all the rest of it. But again, was lucky enough to see the real person, as a lot of people who knew him would vouch for that and know that. But yeah, I could write a book about the stories we had. He was very anti-government and things like that, but fascinating, fascinating again for somebody like me who just loves the extreme of people's minds and the things that how they see things, as opposed to just the way you read about it, and how, politics and things like that would tell you, well, this is the way it should be and this is the norm. It was wonderful. But I know people in the town again would have seen him walking down and into our house and thought, oh my God, he lives in there. But that was his home. He was happy there. Sure, as the owner of the place that these people lived in, it was challenging at times. There's no doubt about that. It was challenging at times. But when I sit back and I think what my mother did for people who were complete strangers, she could have not done those things, but she chose to. So I think what she did, and would still probably be doing, only for she was more or less nicely put out of her home and her business and her way of life, what she did as a woman on her own, starting off in that business as a young woman, trying to keep that afloat, trying to do two and three jobs when maybe there wasn't many guests coming, taking in people with, now mental health is a big thing and people, are more aware of it and people have become more accepting of it. But I mean, years and years ago, I mean, people were just walked away from you. If somebody was drunk and they were singing a song, a lot of people just walk the other side of the road. Good people who would go to church, good people who would see themselves as kindly and godlike and all the rest of it. I watched people walk the other side of the road, ashamed to be seen near these people. And with the young guys with the mental health issues, some of these guys were in their 20s, with mental health issues and nobody to help them. And, I mean, terrible, absolutely terrible. So I, all my life, had experiences of all those things. But tough and all as they would have been, maybe sometimes, yes, I would have thought how nice it would have been just to live in a house where, your mum went to work and just came home and whatever one of those houses do, really, But we did all the same things, but we just had so many different life experiences with those people, good, bad, and different. But what a wake up call, what a wake up call about family life and, just being left out there because you were maybe too difficult to deal with at home or whatever, just can't deal with you anymore. So somebody else may choose to do that. And I can understand how that is tough. It definitely is tough, you know what I mean? It takes great balls, as they say, to be able to continue a normal life when lots of things like that are going on. But yeah, that all made me the kind of person that I am. It made me care about the people in front of me, regardless of what age they are, what they look like, what size they are, or anything else. And I remember when I initially was training to be a group exercise instructor, and I think I may have mentioned it to my classes. You're asked a question of, well, what kind of groups do you think you want to teach when you become an instructor? And I think at the time, I don't even know, did I really want to become an instructor? In my daily life, I'm a very different person to what I present as when I'm teaching my classes. I mean, the same principles are there, the same love is there for my classes and all those kind of things, but I just mean my own being. Um, and most of them wanted to teach in a gym setting, 18 upwards, which I suppose was fine, you know what I mean? They were all quite young. But I remember having been to group exercise classes myself in maybe two venues over my life because I wasn't to be a fitness instructor was nothing that ever came into my head at any time. I sort of happened upon it in a way. I remember because I was somebody who went to the classes on my own, alone, shall we say, it would have been easy to have felt that that wasn't the venue for you. You would see little groups around the side walls, all in their, friendly groups, all chatting. And so somebody that was walking into a class on their own could very easily feel, oh my God, I feel lonely. I feel alone. I feel as if I stand out. I feel as if I don't fit in here. Maybe I don't look right. Maybe my fitness clothes aren't branded. Whatever the case may be, that's what stayed with me. So when I was asked that question, I made it clear that I wanted to teach people who I felt I could help make a difference for, or people that needed somebody like me as their instructor to teach them. And I can honestly say that the comments that come back to me over the years have been about those things. Thank you, Caroline. You've made a difference in my life. Maybe more confident. Appreciate the kind of group that they're in. Um, you know, feel free to come alone to class, that you don't have to come with somebody else. While they talk about, a fitness buddy is fine. That's fine. Would I have felt better if I had somebody to go to class with? Maybe. I don't know. But the thing is that if your buddy doesn't go, it's so much easier for you then to say, well, I'll not bother then. I'll wait until you're ready to go the next time. So sometimes, it's hard to go alone, but at least you've gone. But they do make comment on that. And I am so grateful for all those things. I really am. Because that, for me, as I've said before, and as anybody who does a job knows, you have to get paid, you have to live, you have to pay your bills. But for me, that's what makes my job so worthwhile. So worthwhile to be able to help with somebody's pain, um, be it physical, emotionally, um, it's just a gift in its own right. So yeah, over the years, I'm beginning to believe that I have achieved what I thought I would like to do. And that's why I always taught my own classes. Yes, I taught in the venues I did 16 years with Ards Leisure, both in Kiltonga and Cumber, as well as Ards. 9 years in David Lloyd's, Esporta, and the Culloden Hotel. But I always had my own classes, and I started off with my own classes outside. And again, that has a whole other thing, because somehow, I don't know if it's the same now, but years back, if you taught classes out in a church hall, somehow, I believe that people thought either you weren't qualified, you just popped up somewhere here to teach a wee class in a church hall. You might not have known what you were really doing, because you weren't in a gym environment, or you weren't associated to a leisure centre or a leisure club, or whatever the case may be. There was never any thought that maybe that instructor took themselves out there for the very reason that I did, that not everybody is able to pay the fees of a leisure centre. And yes, you may be promised, 150, a choice of 150 classes over a period of time. That's wonderful. I don't know anybody that can do 150 classes a week. So the reality is that for me, and I speak only for myself, and I'm not passing any judgment on anybody else on anything that I have talked about. But for me, I wanted to take what I knew out to people who didn't want to join a gym for whatever reason, didn't have enough money, suffering from depression, didn't have a friend to go with, didn't feel they had the right clothes, didn't feel they looked right, lack of confidence, all the reasons that people think I'd like to do that, but I can't. That's why I wanted to go out into the church hall. And believe you me, it was tough. It was extremely tough trying to build classes up. You'd go to a class one day that you'd started, and you'd maybe have 18 people, and you'd go back the next day and there'd be 5 there. Because fitness is hard. Fitness is definitely a hard thing. It's all right thinking, yeah, I need to go to fitness classes. I need to do this. I need to do that. But to actually start them, stick at them, stay with it, and, get hot and sweaty and feel tired and all the rest of it is another podcast day. So I hope you've enjoyed the podcast this morning, this afternoon, this evening, or whatever. I hope you have a great day, and that you enjoy listening to them, that they give you some little boost or something. Um, and if you have any questions or queries or anything you'd like to ask me, I'll put them on the list, and I'll certainly do them in the next podcast if something else doesn't come into my head before that. Okay, so enjoy the rest of your day. Keep your heart up, one foot in front of the other. Again, you can contact me at Caroline's Pilates on Facebook, send me a text or a message, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so lots of love. Thanks for listening, and take care. Bye bye.